Welcome. Today we're diving into a really pressing global issue, climate change. But specifically, how we get the solutions deployed. It's not just about inventing new tech, right? It's getting it to places that need it most.
Exactly. And that often means transferring climate-friendly technology to what we sometimes call periphery countries, places often relying on older, high-emission systems.
And there's a massive bottleneck there. I saw a figure from UNCTAD. It's huge.
Oh, it's astronomical. They estimate these regions need something like $1.7 trillion every single year.
Wow. Annually. Just for renewable
But
energy.
for renewables. So, it's pretty clear that public funds or massive direct investments alone aren't going to bridge that gap anytime soon.
Okay, so if that direct route is lagging, how do we get better tech into these economies? The sources we looked at point to something called technology licensing.
Right. This is where multinational companies, M&Es, basically grant firms in these developing markets the right to use their technology.
And it's often not the absolute cutting-edge stuff, is it? Maybe older tech for the M&E.
Often, yes. It might be technology nearing the end of its cycle in, say, Europe or North America, but crucially, it's still a significant step up cleaner, more efficient than what the local firm is currently using.
So it's a potentially powerful channel. But, as the research highlights, just signing a license agreement doesn't automatically mean things get greener.
Precisely. That's what researchers call the black box problem. We know licensing can work, but we need to understand when and why it leads to actual environmental improvements on the ground. What are the conditions for success?
And that's exactly what this huge study we're digging into tried to unpack. They looked at, over 2,000 firms?
Yeah, 2,237 firms across 30 different countries, mainly in Eastern Europe and Central Asia.
Why that region specifically?
Well, it's a fascinating context. These are economies grappling with rapid change, trying to catch up, facing institutional challenges, but also really hungry for growth and modernization. It makes them a good place to study these dynamics.
And they use a specific lens to analyze all this data.
Yes, a framework called Ability Motivation Opportunity, or AO. It's a way to remember that success isn't just about having the tech, the ability to use it, the motivation to implement it, and the opportunity provided by the external environment all matter immensely.
Okay, let's start with the baseline then. The big question. Does technology licensing actually lead to more environmental action? What did this study find there?
The fundamental finding confirmed the premise. Yes, firms that got licensed foreign technology did adopt more measures to improve their environmental impact over a 3-year period.
More measures, like what specifically?
They counted things like upgrading machinery, improving energy management, waste minimization efforts, controlling air pollution, even better lighting systems, a whole range. On average, firms adopted about 3 such measures.
Okay, 3 measures on average. But here's what surprised me a bit in the findings. It wasn't just about licensing explicitly green tech, was it?
No, and that's a key insight. The improvements happened even when M&Es licensed mature, non-energy specific technologies. Think standard manufacturing equipment, maybe processing lines that weren't originally designed with a primary environmental goal.
Wait, how does that work? If I license an older machine that's just, a regular machine, why would they make my firm suddenly greener?
Because technology transfer is rarely just a physical asset, it's usually a package deal. When a firm licenses technology, especially from a major M&E, they often get more than just the equipment.
Like the instructions?
Yeah.
Or training?
Exactly. They often receive operational best practices, maybe proprietary know-how, workflows, things developed in the M&E's home country where environmental regulations might have been stricter for years.
I see. So it's less about the machine itself being inherently green from day one, and more about the whole system of operation that comes bundled with it, like better resource use, less waste built into the process.
Precisely. They're importing efficiency, essentially. And greater efficiency very often translates directly into environmental benefits, using less energy, fewer raw materials, producing less waste. It's a positive side effect of adopting better business processes.
Okay, that makes sense. But as you said, it's not automatic. The extent of these gains varied a lot. Licensing opens the door, but you need other things to be in place.
Right. And that brings us squarely to the AMO framework. Let's start with A for ability.
Ability. So the firm's own internal capability to actually use the new tech properly.
Exactly. It's what academics call absorptive capacity. Do you have the technical skills, the management processes, the know-how internally to really integrate and leverage this new licensed technology?
And how did they measure that ability?
They used labor productivity as a proxy, basically how efficient the firm already was in terms of output per worker. A more productive firm likely has better internal systems and skills.
And did that make a difference?
A huge difference. The correlation was really strong. Higher productivity significantly amplified the positive environmental effects of the licensed technology.
Can you give us a sense of the numbers, like low ability versus high ability firms?
Yeah, the difference was quite stark. Firms with low productivity that got licensed tech adopted around 3 environmental measures, sort of the baseline average we mentioned.
Okay.
But firms with high productivity, high ability that acquired the same kind of licensed technology, they adopted over 5 measures.
Wow. So having that internal capability nearly doubles the environmental benefit you get from the licensing deal.
It acts as a massive amplifier. Your internal readiness is crucial.
Okay. So ability is essential. Next up is M, motivation. Having the tools isn't enough. You need the drive to use them for environmental ends.
Correct. And the study looked at 2 kinds of motivation, intrinsic and extrinsic.
Intrinsic. That's doing it because you believe in it, right? Internally driven.
Exactly. The desire to do something for its own sake. They measured this by looking at whether environmental or climate issues were formally written into the firm's strategic objectives. Was it part of their mission?
And did that formal commitment matter much?
It mattered more than almost anything else. The results here were incredibly striking.
How so?
Okay, get this. Firms that had licensed the technology and had this intrinsic motivation, environmental goals in their strategy, were predicted to adopt about 6 climate-friendly measures.
6 measures. That's double the average.
Right. Now, compare that to firms that were unmotivated, no strategic goals, and didn't license the tech. They were predicted to adopt almost none. 0.
That's a massive difference. So putting sustainability into your core strategy actually transforms how you leverage licensed technology.
It seems to be absolutely transformative, yes, but there's also the other type of motivation, extrinsic.
Extrinsic, so driven by outside forces, pressure from others.
Exactly. Driven by external demands or rewards. Usually this comes from powerful stakeholders, like big customers.
Like if your main buyer says you need to meet certain environmental standards.
Precisely. The study measured this by checking if customers required the firm to adhere to specific environmental standards or certifications, like ISO 14001, for example.
And did that external pressure work too?
It definitely reinforced the gains. Firms facing these kinds of customer requirements adopted about 5 measures on average when they also had licensed tech.
So both internal drive and external pressure significantly boost the environmental payoff from licensing.
They do. And that points to some interesting societal implications, particularly around supply chains, if those big multinational buyers demand green certifications.
They're essentially creating that extrinsic motivation for their suppliers in these developing markets. They're pulling them towards greener practices.
Exactly. It institutionalizes the motivation. You have to leverage the cleaner aspects of your licensed tech to meet that standard and keep the customer happy. Customer demand becomes a really potent tool for climate action.
Okay, ability and motivation are clear. That leaves O for opportunity. This one sounds a bit different. It's about the external context.
Yes, opportunity is about the environment the firm operates in. And in these kinds of institutionally complex settings, one factor emerged as incredibly important: managerial attention. Or rather, what distracts it.
Distracts it. Like
The
what?
bureaucracy, red tape, regulations. The study looked at this through a really interesting lens, what they call the bureaucracy trap.
The bureaucracy trap. Okay, tell me more.
They measured opportunity, or the lack of it, by looking at the percentage of senior management's time spent just dealing with government regulations, navigating complex rules, filling out forms, ensuring compliance.
Oh, I can see where this is going.
Yeah.
Managers only have so much time and mental energy.
Exactly. Time is finite. If your top managers are spending, say, 30–40% of their week just battling bureaucracy,
They don't have the bandwidth left to focus on optimizing that new licensed equipment or implementing the environmental best practices that came with it.
that's precisely what the study found. And the finding was dramatic, with huge implications for policy and governance. Increased time spent dealing with regulations weakened the positive link between licensed technology and environmental action.
Weakened it. So the benefits of the tech were reduced.
Yes, the burden of navigating the bureaucracy essentially crowded out the effort needed to implement the environmental upgrades. The complexity cost was too high.
And you mentioned earlier this could even lead to a shocking reversal.
It could, and it did. In situations where managers were spending a very large proportion of their time on red tape, the highest levels of bureaucratic burden,
What happened then?
the licensed technology could actually become a liability.
A liability? How?
Those highly burdened firms ended up adopting fewer environmental measures than similar firms that hadn't licensed any foreign technology at all.
Wow. So they licensed potentially cleaner tech, but the hassle of dealing with regulations was so overwhelming that they ended up doing less for the environment than if they just stuck with their old ways.
That's what the data suggests. The combined cost and complexity of absorbing the new technology, piled on top of the extreme friction from bureaucracy, resulted in a net negative outcome environmentally. It really highlights a massive, often hidden societal cost of inefficient government.
That finding just changes the whole conversation about climate policy in these regions, doesn't it? It's not enough to just push technology out there.
Not at all. The conclusion can't simply be facilitate technology transfer. It has to be much more holistic. You need to clear the path for that technology to actually be effective once it arrives.
So the core policy takeaway is what? We need to target all three AMO pillars.
Simultaneously, yes. Think of licensing as opening the door, but policymakers hold the keys to ability, motivation, and opportunity. You need all three to unlock the potential.
Okay, let's break down those policy actions. For ability, boosting the firm's internal readiness, what can governments do?
Policies here need to go beyond just, say, generic investment grants. It means targeted capacity building programs. Think about public investment in the right kind of technical infrastructure, improving access to advanced vocational training, making sure the workforce is actually ready to operate and maintain the kinds of innovations bundled with licensed tech.
Got it. Build up that absorptive capacity. Now, for motivation, creating the drive, what are the levers there?
This is where smart incentives come in. Things like targeted fiscal incentives, maybe environmental subsidies that specifically reward green innovation, not just basic compliance. Also, clear, predictable regulatory frameworks that reward firms for going greener.
And leveraging that extrinsic motivation we talked about.
Absolutely. Policymakers can actively promote and maybe even help subsidize the adoption of internationally recognized sustainability certificates like ISO 14001, HACCP, those kinds of things. That taps directly into customer demand and market access, making green practices a business necessity.
Okay, ability built, motivation stoked.
Right.
Finally, opportunity, tackling that bureaucracy trap.
This might be the most direct lever, and maybe the most impactful in some of these contexts. It's about streamlining administrative procedures, radically reducing bureaucratic hurdles.
So cutting red tape is actually climate policy.
In this context, absolutely. It frees up that critical resource, senior management's time and attention. It allows them to stop fighting fires with regulators and start focusing on implementing the cleaner, more efficient features of the technology they've licensed. The biggest barrier might not always be lack of capital. Sometimes it's just sheer complexity.
This has been a really insightful deep dive. It connects these huge global challenges, climate change, economic development, right down to the nitty-gritty of how individual firms operate, their ability, their motivation, their opportunity.
And that's the central takeaway for you listening. Successful climate technology transfer, especially to developing economies, isn't just about the technology itself. It hinges critically on the firm's internal capacity to use it. Its commitment, both internal and external, to environmental goals, and crucially, a supportive policy environment that enables rather than obstructs action.
A really powerful framework. And just to leave you with something to think about, there's a nuance in that opportunity finding about regulation.
Yes. The study clearly found that the quantity of regulation measured by the time managers spent dealing with it was harmful. More time spent equals less environmental improvement from licensed tech.
Right.
But there's other emerging research suggesting that the quality of environmental regulation might be different. Countries with well-designed, clear, effectively enforced environmental policies, think countries with a high environmental performance index score might actually see a positive effect. Good regulation could potentially strengthen the link between licensed tech and green outcomes.
So it's not just less regulation is always better. It might be about better, smarter regulation.
That's the critical question it raises for policymakers globally. Is the goal simply to minimize the amount of regulation to reduce that time burden? Or should the focus be on maximizing the efficiency, clarity, and quality of environmental laws, setting clear expectations without bogging firms down in endless process? Getting that balance right could be key for climate progress in the coming years.